This week on To the Contrary, Hillary Clinton makes it official. Then, the pay gap in places calling for an end to the pay gap. Then, college students' sexual practices head south. Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, Hillary, ready to run. Using social media, video, and email, Hillary Clinton will launch her 2016 campaign for president. After the digital kickoff, she'll begin campaigning in Iowa, where she finished third in 2008. The announcement was long anticipated and no surprise. Clinton's been dropping hints about her intentions for some time.
Don't you someday want to see a woman president of the United States of America? Well, in many ways, all of these questions can only be answered by you.
Okay, so will you, or women, the you of women, electing Hillary president because she is indeed wooing the women's vote?
Well, let's put it this way. In 2012, 55% of the women voted for Obama, and all the analysts agreed that the women delivered the presidency for him. So why not Hillary?
Because in the midterm elections, we found that substance mattered more than gender, and I'm going to put my money on that for 2016.
I think Hillary is hugely popular among women because she's going to be transformative, not only being the first woman president, but she has a track record of being so good on all the women's issues. But also, she's hugely popular among millennials. And I think that that's going to put her in the White House.
Well, if she can get past the scandals and she doesn't have an October surprise, she may just do it.
Okay, you say that, substance matters above gender, but you don't think she has any substance?
Well, this is what's going to be interesting. And if I think that I probably disagree with Hillary Clinton on 90% of what she stands for, whether we're talking about the workplace or energy, healthcare. But what I think where she's sort of most vulnerable is being overhandled. I think that this week alone, I heard sort of pundits talk about old Hillary, new Hillary, the refashioned Hillary. And what I wanted to say was, you should go away for a week. You should think about all of the things that you stand for, and you should come back as yourself. And if you do that, then we'll see what happens. But I think you have a lot better chance of winning.
You know, it's very interesting you're saying that, because the launching is going to be online through social media, follow up with what they've been describing as small meetings, which for people that know Hillary, and I know you probably know her well, I did some work for the Clinton administration, so I've been exposed to her. That's her asset. She's a woman, and one-on-one, she is powerful. She's substantive. Nobody will argue with her. I guess we differ with you that this is a woman of substance with an incredible, impeccable track record. Of course, things have not always been perfect. So for me, the launching is very telling that she wants to be in charge, and she's going to do it very, very differently. This is her, in her mid-60s, launching her campaign on social media and appealing to her strength, which is her personal ability and her knowledge of issues.
What do we think about launching on social media?
Well,
I mean, obviously it's very
Right.
very today, but as one who covered many presidential launches when I was a daily news reporter, it lacks an event. It lacks, the excitement, I think.
Well, I don't know why this is a surprise at all. I mean, she opened her headquarters, or signed a lease on a headquarters in Brooklyn Heights, which is a very affluent part of New York City. And, so she's not, her people, and they're not dummies. They know what they're doing. I mean, they're building it up. And I think just doing social media is because, everyone does social media. And it's really what she's going to do once she's made that announcement, whether it's significant or not.
What about the wooing women? I mean, she's obviously, she needs to walk a tightrope. She can't offend men, of course, but clearly she's appealing to women, and she always has been a woman's woman as a politician. Can that hurt her?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a great asset, and I think that she's especially popular now among young women. So, as co-chair of the National Ready for Hillary Millennial Council, for the past 2 years, all around the country, we've been seeing young people so excited about Hillary. I mean, we have thrown 1,300 grassroots events, jam-packed with young people who are just so excited about her.
So will it be like the Obama effect on young people?
Very much so. I think that a lot of organizers, young organizers who grew up with Obama, are now very excited also about Hillary Clinton.
How much do you think you mentioned the 2014 elections, how much the off-presidential year, when voter turnout was extremely low, how much can you gauge her chances of presidential success based on 2014 when, you know, a presidential race always draws out a lot more people. How many more people is always a question, and it's an important question. But still, you know you're going to have bigger turnout.
We will have bigger turnout on both sides, of course, but I think one thing to pay attention to is that 2014 was a pretty contentious race, and part of what made it contentious was that there were a lot of races that were really focused on this women's vote, and they, unfortunately, I think, for the conversation nationally, they took it to in the wrong direction. The Democrats who were running on it, you know, people like Mark Udall out in Colorado, I think they overplayed their hand, right? And that more women were saying, hey, we've got real economic issues, we've got Obamacare to consider, things are looking terrible in the Middle East. We've got all sorts of real concerns. We don't want to have this conversation anymore.
Okay, but let me jump in here for a second, if I may, because you're absolutely right. However, the motivated side were the Republicans, the Christian right, obviously because they were out of power. And, you know, Udall got called Senator Uterus, and all that kind of ugly stuff happened. But, I mean, so you're right that it turned out to the voters who turned out in that election, it was a losing issue. Will it stay a losing issue when you have more young people, more progressive people going to the polls?
I think it will, but this is where I would warn Republicans, is that the war on women narrative is going to change. It's going to change with Hillary as the presumptive nominee. It's going to be much more focused on the workplace, paid leave, paycheck fairness, those kinds of issues. I mean, I think that a lot of Republicans are not prepared for that. I think they think it is really gone. And at the same time, I think that the GOP has something going for them, which is they have a big pool of people right now, all with different ideas, all targeting different demographics, all with sort of causing a debate between them within the party. And that's a very good thing. That's a very healthy thing for both Republicans and for the country at large.
And I'm a big Hillary supporter, but it's not sure. I mean, she really has a hurdle to overcome. I mean, she lost to Obama. She did not run the best campaign. She didn't have the strongest team, even though she had the most money ever at that time. So she has to overcome a lot of barriers, as much as I wish her the best of luck.
And how does she do that this time?
Well, she has to organize herself well. She has to be in charge of her campaign team. She cannot overexpose herself, and she cannot behave like that, you know, that it's for certain that she's going to win the presidency. She has to fight for it every day.
You know, you talked about drawing millennials, and we all remember President Obama having that rock star or being given by, I would say, the male-dominated left, that, you know, he had this rock star power. Is any woman going to be given that power by the progressive men in this country who really helped get Obama elected the first time?
I think so, and I'm seeing that all across the country right now with the Millennial Council and all our events for Hillary. Our generation grew up.
I'm talking about like political leaders like Marcus, you know, the Daily Cause, and you know, young guys who are out there, early supporters of Obama.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think since the last election, we've seen so much from Hillary. She's done a wonderful job as Secretary of State. I think the country has grown ready for Hillary. And you know, our generation.
What about the State Department email scandal? How's that going to play?
I think that most Americans don't really think that the email issue is a big issue. They're more focused on how we're going to grow the middle class, and are issues that Hillary has proven she's very strong on. That's what concerns most Americans right now.
Well, you bring up the scandal. I mean, that's just one of many that she's had as Secretary of State, and so she's sort of the Teflon Don in that she seems to be able to bounce stuff off. But there's a point where someone's going to sit her down and say, why'd you do this or why this happened? And she can't, as you said, she can't just assume I'm going to be the nominee. She's going to have to fight for it.
Which is going to dog her the most as the campaign progresses? The email situation, Benghazi, or the one I see as her strongest problem, which is taking the Clinton Foundation, taking money from all those Islamic countries where women's rights are just non-existent virtually.
There seems to be a shared problem, which is sort of the control of information, and that is going to be an issue, especially I think progressives, to their credit, talk much more about transparency, and I think that that's something that she's going to have to overcome. And to your question about how the media will treat her, I do think we've seen the media treat her very poorly in the past, which is interesting. I mean, some on the left, MSNBC in particular, said some terrible things.
Most high-profile women, I mean, the Carly Fiorina and Meg Whitman as well.
But, well, actually, that's where I was going to respond. Right before the show, I was actually sharing with one of the producers a new article that came out by a professor at GW and AU, and they actually analyzed 600 congressional races where they found that gender actually did not have a statistically significant impact on people's perceptions of the candidate. So it's a very good time for a woman to be running. She has the ear of the American people, and the media, I think, will give her a fair shot.
All right. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay or at To The Con.
When a beloved team in search of a new home turns to an expert team from Goldman Sachs, a major construction project kicks off. One of the smartest, greenest football stadiums comes to life. Thousands of fans take their seats. A local economy begins to flourish, and the city of Santa Clara makes progress.
And let us know what you think. From the Clinton presidential bid to the pay gap. While women outnumber men as students in the nation's liberal arts colleges and universities, gender inequality remains a factor for female professors and staff at those schools. The Chronicle of Higher Education reports women made up about 30% of full-time professors in 2013. An analysis of the data also shows women make less than their male colleagues, and they're more likely to be part-time adjunct faculty than full-time. And that gap is evident in the so-called liberal Ivy League schools. Harvard, which has a woman president and a Women in Public Policy program, pays its male professors about $15,000 more than female professors. Gender pay gaps were also recently revealed in the government offices of President Obama and Hillary Clinton, both of whom are known for their support of women's rights.
Yeah, it is.
So, these so-called, what the right would call liberal institutions anyway, and politicians are themselves engaged in paying women less than they pay men. How much of a problem, and Hillary Clinton as well, we were just talking about, how much of a problem is it going to be for her in her presidential run?
I think it is a problem for Democrats because they have made the wage gap and pay equity such a central part of their campaign to women. I expect, and I've always said this, that the same problems that plague all of the economy plague these particular more progressive or liberal institutions, that women are choosing to go into women's studies and they're not being paid as much as the professors in economics or in chemistry or other areas, maybe business, and that more women are choosing to work part-time and they want adjunct positions, things of that nature. If I had a guess, similarly in the White House, you're seeing that the bigger issue maybe is that men seem to be sort of staying around longer and making their way up the chain less than women. But all of this seems pretty much sort of as we can expect, but they, be careful if this is going to be the centerpiece of their campaign.
Should women be demanding of the politicians? I'm not surprised, quite frankly, by the Obama White House because he's, he talks the talk, but Hillary Clinton actually walks the walk, and even so, her staff,
How
was
are we going to
not
solve
equally
this
paid.
problem? I'm thinking fire everybody from everywhere, hire them again, and then you get everybody getting the same salaries. There's a bit of apples and oranges because when you look at the same position, the pay inequities are not there, certainly for the White House analysis I've seen. I'm not quite sure what they analyze on Hillary's team, but I understand that the Republicans are saying, well, that's how you give us the global numbers, well, we're going to do the global analysis on you. But we know that the true analysis on pay equity is very specific. It's career specific because some careers have a bigger gap than others.
Well, and
that's
what's really usually the difference is that right out of school or graduate school, right out of college, I should say, or graduate school, men and women tend to make very close salaries, but it's in their 40s and their 50s that the real gaps start to emerge.
Exactly. And of course, if you stay in the workplace, and I say I'm an example of that, I have stayed in the workplace, I never left the workplace, I'm doing much better than all my friends had left the workplace to raise their children just because of longevity. But there are structural problems that are real, and those are the ones that we need to pay attention. And just because it's not every job, everywhere, we should not belittle the issue. I think it's a very critical issue. And I think the Republicans would like to get rid of it. I think it's real.
Well, it's all about economics, and the fact is, that more women are adjuncts. People can't get jobs, so you have PhDs getting 2 or 3 PhDs. You have attorneys, sitting there trying to, get a job. So it's economically, if the older faculty who are tenured don't leave, these schools can't afford to pay a tenured faculty member and an up-and-coming tenured tenure track person, whether it's a man or a woman. So I think that has to be taken into consideration. And also with the federal government, they have a quirky system with grades and steps, and so it really depends on how the person is hired in. If you're hired at a 15 versus a 13, of course you're going to make more money, and it's about the experience of the individual.
And one of the best sort of response that could be, I would imagine, a bipartisan response is to grow the economy and to grow job creation. Because when you have more jobs, you have more negotiating room, you have more competition of wages, and everybody does better. And that's something that I hope Republicans and Democrats could both get behind.
And I do have to point out, Bonnie, that progressives have been closing the gender pay gap. I mean, President Obama has appointed women into many prominent top positions in his administration.
Right, but 35% of his cabinet, but Bill Clinton, many years earlier, 41% women in his cabinet. So, statistically speaking, he's not where he should be.
Well, but his national security advisor, his communications director, his deputy chief of staff, all women. And Hillary Clinton has been a force behind the Paycheck Fairness Act, and has been working so hard for many years to close the gap. So I think we need to be really careful about these statistics. And I think one of the greatest impediments to closing the gender pay gap is denying that there actually is a gap, which we see a lot from the conservative side, and that's a real danger.
I'm going to jump in for one last second and just say that I think Republicans for many years were wrong, or conservatives, I should say, were wrong to sort of maybe seem as though they were dismissing it. But what they're dismissing is the 23-cent statistic, right? That women are only paid 77 cents on the dollar. Every mainstream media outlet now, for the most part, has accepted that that is a gross overstatement. And that if we actually look at the real wage gap, it's probably somewhere between 4 and 6 cents. And I think if we look at that honestly, and we say why.
But I must say, you're right about that, but I do see Republicans who perpetrate the myth that it's because women don't work as many hours as men. I'm not sure if that's true, but I will say that the Bureau of Labor Statistics always say that this is an hour-by-hour comparison. And so that using that old shield of, oh, well, women don't work as many hours, it's not accurate. And it comes from Republicans.
Well, look, I think that there's a variety of variables that might go into this, right? There might be some social issues, biological, there may be choices, all of this may go into, but we have to be honest about how big the gap is and how much you really can change it, because women and men are going to make different choices. They are going to want different things. Patricia has worked consistently full-time in the workplace, but many
and
women
you have too, with 3 kids.
No, I haven't actually. I worked part-time and I worked full-time. I've done a variety of things, and I'm sure it's paid.
But did you take time off?
I did take some time off.
How much?
Not a lot. I worked part-time from home for a while. But it's definitely...
But that's different from taking a year or 2 or 10 years off.
Absolutely.
And women do, women need to know they trip themselves up really badly when they do that.
And the larger point also, Bonnie, is that we need to change workplace structures to better accommodate women and families. And Democrats have really been leading that charge.
And I just wanted to say, we also need, not that I'm blaming women, but we talk about empowerment. Just like a man goes to an interview and says, well, I'm only going to accept this and I want this and that. As women, I don't know if we necessarily are that aggressive. And I think that's something we should also address.
Training for that is definitely in order. Now, risky casual sex practices among college students. New research on college students and sexual behavior shows a disturbing trend. According to a New York University researcher, during their freshman year, students from low-income, less educated families were more likely to use condoms than those from more highly educated backgrounds. But as they spend more time on campus, their behavior becomes riskier. The study suggests low-income students adopt the attitudes of their higher-income peers, who are apparently less worried about contracting an STD or becoming pregnant. A Centers for Disease Control report released this week, meanwhile, shows teen pregnancy is at an all-time low, finding that 90% of teens use birth control. 90%. So 90% of teens are using it, and then it drops and drops as they get into college and become particularly sophomores from freshmen. Why is it, and why particularly are kids from higher, better educated, more affluent backgrounds thinking that having unprotected sex is somehow okay?
Well, it comes from the community that you're raised in or that you grow up in. And so if you're raised to think that, well, as long as you have the right person, it's okay, then there's a problem. I think that, if you look at why they don't or do, because we're talking about hookups. We're talking about, the casual one-time, two-time kind of thing. So it doesn't excuse it. But, in that thought, it really actually frightens me that they aren't concerned about STIs and STDs. I guess they feel, well, if she's on the pill or some birth control, then she won't get pregnant, and they're not thinking about the bigger ramification.
Does that have anything to do, I have to ask, with the fact that AIDS, which when it first started happening in the 80s, or first became public that it was an epidemic in the 80s, was a death sentence, and now it's not. So, it's still not anything anybody wants to contract, believe me, but it doesn't kill you. There is medication for it. So is that why a lot of these young people are saying, well, the worst thing happens, I get AIDS, I go on a cocktail?
Yeah, what you see on the data and some of the latest reports, there's two issues here. There's contraception and pregnancy. And it seems that the message on contraception and pregnancy it's particularly for educated girls, is strong and is consistent, and the birth rates, teenage pregnancy rates in the United States have gone down. So that's a positive side of the story. What some people believe is because they're taking care of the pregnancy, then they're not as worried about the STDs, which is the point that you're making. And they're two different strategies, because the condom really is about the STDs.
Well, and you are in the business and have made a career in educating young people about dangers to them. So how do you reverse that?
It has to do
and I'm
with...
assuming, I'm sorry to interrupt, but in public schools, there is, for the most part, sex education, and it's not abstinence only. Whereas in private schools, I don't know if they offer or require sex education as much as public schools do. So I'm thinking, as a possibility, that the more affluent kids are getting out of public schools where they don't usually, private schools rather, where they haven't been told use condoms, as kids are told, as less affluent kids are being told.
Well, it's very interesting because my kids go to private school, and I thought when I heard the story the opposite, that I am so confident that they're teaching them about sex education, because I've gone to the parent-teacher conference and they tell me how they're doing it, that I have relinquished my responsibility. So, and the sense that I'm surrounded in a community at risk, my kids don't feel that they're at risk because they don't live in a community at risk. And I think you need that thread, that real thread, in order to act in the case of this hookups, to use your condom so you don't get the STD.
Or one-night stands, as we old-timers used to call it.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting, though, listening to you about this, because it kind of goes back to, if anyone's read Wendy Shalit's Return to Modesty, and this was sort of her whole argument, that the more we offer sex ed and the more we talk about it, the more it sort of actually actually encourages sort of a promiscuous culture. Now, I'm somewhere maybe in between on this, that we can't just ignore it, that there is stuff for children to know and understand, but at the same time, perhaps we have gone too far, and that kids have just begun to tune it out. The culture is, tremendously over sexualizes young women. Perhaps some of this has now just become the sense, combination of young people's sense of being invincible with sort of an oversaturation of sexuality in a way that they haven't really contemplated. These are serious diseases and serious problems that you could contend with.
Well, studies actually show that young people want to know how to protect themselves. They want to have all of the information. And, teenage pregnancy now is at an all-time low. So I think that...
So doesn't that show that they are getting that information for the most part?
Yes, it does show that, and it shows that we need to continue with the comprehensive sexual education, and we need to make sure that young people understand and have access to the full range of reproductive options. That's part of equality.
But why the split between the lower? First of all, my question: why are more educated, more affluent kids less aware of the dangers to them and acting like there isn't as much? And then why do lower income kids go to college, meet these supposedly, smarter people, and decide to adopt their stupid way of life?
Well, there's probably a range of social factors going into that. Perhaps peer pressure plays a role. I think that there's just a number of complex factors all going into that. But the bottom line is, teenage pregnancy is at an all-time low, and we need to keep up with the comprehensive sex ed.
All right, thank you. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/tothecontrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.